Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to WCS EU Challenger. We're here at the Blizzard Esports Arena in Burbank, California, ready to crown the champion of the European scene. My name is Fear Dragon, and I am joined today by the one and only Nathanius. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, it would only be better if I was standing closer to you, Ravi.
Well, we know that we need to keep this stream PG, so we had to create a little bit of a distance.
Breaks my heart. Breaks my heart every time.
That's okay. We can just show our love for StarCraft instead of each other for today, because we got some really, really awesome stuff coming up. If you weren't following us yesterday, and you might not be familiar with the actual way that this Challenger season works, this season we did have a change from last year, where now we actually have these really awesome group stages. And when these group stages are played out, basically 2 people will advance on to the next round, kind of similar to last year, where you had the normal single elimination bracket. But in this case, you get to see up to 5 matches, actually exactly 5 matches, always, every single time.
Yeah, and it's double elimination groups, GSL style, and we get to go through the European games as well as the American games for Group B today, so that means lots of StarCraft coming your way to kick things off. It's going to be a lot of Terrans in the Europe group.
Ooh, a lot of Terrans. And of course, these guys are all going to be fighting for a pretty awesome prize pool. It's totaling up to $10,000. And you can see first place prize at $1,600. Not included on that graphic, by the way, is the fact that there are a lot of WCS points, which are incredibly important, Nate, because those are used for seeding at not only other seasons of Challenger, but also at the actual WCS events themselves.
That's right. I mean, the circuit events, we've already had one of them this year. We got 3 more coming up after we're done with Challenger. And all of that plays into seeding as well as your potential to get into the global playoffs at the end of the year. And if you want to be the champion, you need to get those points so you can qualify for BlizzCon. Yeah,
it's pretty important. It adds up very, very quickly. But of course, we want to talk a little bit about yesterday as well. If you guys missed the broadcast, I'd highly recommend checking some of those games out. From Europe, we actually had Showtime and Hero Marine advance on. Now, Nate, I think that these were the expected results for a lot of people, but the way in which they happened, I think, was less expected. I think a lot of people thought that it was going to be a little bit more one-sided.
Showtime had a pretty shaky go at it, and Hero Marine really did a great job of bludgeoning his way through that group. He played extremely well, considering, you know, all the remarks and whatnot people want to make about Terran versus Protoss. He came with some good, sharp builds, and I thought that Showtime had a big chance of being eliminated yesterday. Hellraiser brought some great games to him, and I kind of expected by the end of it for Hellraiser to be that second player to make it out.
Yeah, but of course, I think, what is it, the ace match curse finally kicks in at the end, where anyone that loses in that first match always ends up winning in the last match. But of course, North America also had a very, very fun group yesterday, as we ended up seeing, of course, Neeb and Jon Snow advancing on out. Once again, I think most people kind of expected those 2 to advance out, but Future is showing some really, really great games yesterday as well.
Yeah, Future had 2 big opportunities to win against Jon Snow in both his first match against him and his second match against him. It came down to the game 3s in both of those series where he had a great push that was going very well, and it was just 1 or 2 things, I think, showing the experience of Jon Snow, having, you know, gotten a lot of good results over the last few years and being that player who is about to become a top NA player. Really, he showed why he was the player to beat in that group, since Neeb, of course, was going to be untouchable.
Yeah, on the verge of it right now. But he's going to have an opportunity, as well as Neeb and everybody else that advanced onto the playoffs, to show their, I guess, their mettle. But of course, today we're going to be finding out 2 more players who will advance to the playoffs for the European group as well as the North American group. We have a pretty awesome group. Nate, I'm sure this makes you a little bit happy to see so many Terrans here, because
lots of Terran and 1 very good Zerg player in Nerchio. TVT gets funny. TVT is a little weird right now. There's a lot of stuff that people are doing. You still have Cyclone memes at the start. You have Ravens to think about in the late game, and I think anybody who watched the qualifier matches for the NA group know that some TVT games can go very long. You have to be very careful about how you want to break defensive positions. I think in the European group, though, that skill level being a little bit higher, we should get some really good games out of these Terrans.
Yeah, I think just being on top of the meta is going to be so important right now, because I feel like TVT, every 1 to 2 weeks that I look at it, it's like there's slight little differences every single time.
Matchup completely changes every other week.
Yeah. So it's going to be very, very fun to see how things go. I believe that our first match is going to end up being Nerchio versus Clem, which should be a very fun one as well.
Clem is a player that I somehow, I know he's been around for a while, but for some reason, I feel like I just don't know a whole lot about him.
Yeah, you know, he's a really, really active player, I would say, in the online tournament scene. And that's not necessarily just because, oh, he doesn't like attending offline events or anything, or he hasn't been good enough to qualify. It's more that he wasn't 16 until very recently. So he wasn't allowed to participate in the WCS events. He's only recently kind of come of age, is now able to start playing in all these things. But he is, I would say, the only reason why I think he hasn't gotten more hype is because he's almost been a little bit overshadowed by Raynor, who has quite literally shown that he's potentially one of the best players in Europe before he even hit the age of 16. But Clem is a very, very strong player, and I'm really interested to see how he actually handles Nurchio in this kind of high-pressure situation.
Yeah, we got to see Future come in yesterday as a WCS debut player, and I guess for Clem, this is going to be one of his first big opportunities to get some momentum going for the year 2018 and try to get some WCS points and perhaps get some good results in the circuit events this year later as well.
Indeed. Well, it looks like our first game is ready. We're hopping on to Eastwatch as we start down in the bottom left-hand corner of the map, top of the blue Terran player, the youngster himself. It's Clem.
And he faces off against the red Zerg player in the northeast, one of the best Zergs in Europe over the years, one of the most consistent, long-standing players. He is Nurchio. And that's a tough matchup to get, of course. Nurchio is a player that we talk about this all the time, and I think that this still had a big impact in Showtime's ability to come back yesterday and in Jon Snow holding well against players that were very competitive, especially in Future, is that you have that experience that if you are a player who has maybe not been as high, you're not winning the big tournaments, you know, when it comes to European Zergs, the conversation has switched from players like Nurchio towards Serral. And, you know, and a Laser as well, who's also had phenomenal results over the last year. So for Nurchio, he's the player that kind of gives me a little bit of that Showtimey vibe where it's like he's not the guy that we're talking about, but he should still be a very strong favorite in this group because he has the experience, he has the knowledge, and he has the composure that if this group gets a little bit out of hand, he should be able to keep things together.
Yeah, the way that I kind of think of Nurchio a lot of the time is kind of the way that I think a lot of people will think of like the Queen of England. It's like, look, you're royalty, you're still kind of in power, but you're not exactly running the government anymore. I mean, you're not necessarily at the absolute top.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, he's, you know, it's like King Arthur. You always think of him as like this sort of royalty in the European scene, but he's not quite, like you said, exactly what he used to be. So I think that he's still going to be a bit favored versus somebody like Clem, but it is still going to be, I think, a hard-fought battle for him.
All right, so let's see how this shapes up as we have just a regular Reaper expand coming out of Clem. Now, of course, you've pointed out a few times already, Rabbi, that Nurchio has gone for the gold base to start things off, and the Reaper can very easily jump between where that gold base is and the main base. So the positioning of things like Queens and those Zerglings are going to be extremely important for making sure that this Reaper does not cause any damage. He's going to go up that ramp into the natural. He will see that there is nothing there. You might have that first sign of panic, but I imagine he will go check that gold base and he'll say, okay, well, I'm not being proxy. This isn't some sort of weird one base all in, but that gold base can be used to ramp up early income and early economy for early attacks that follow this up.
Yeah, he has spotted out a little bit of the creep, so he has confirmed that gold base in case anyone was wondering about that, but looks like he's actually retreating back home, maybe anticipating a couple of these Lings making their way across the map. There's a single Marine out, but that one Marine's going to have a hard time versus two Lings. He's going to do his best to try and survive. The Overlord's going to escape, and the Reaper should be able to save the Marine.
Yeah, Reaper's going to do a good job taking the shots for the Marine. Now, wasn't able to get the Overlord, but when we talk about the follow-up, the factory is done. I believe the reactor's completed as well, so Hellions are going to start coming out, and we have a starport beginning for either the Banshee follow-up or, you know, the Raven, the Viking. There's a lot that you can do with it. I always like seeing the Viking come out early on, since with a map this big, even if they don't put out too many Overlords, you know that there's no high ground that you can really play with, so there's a lot of areas that you can hide those Overlords where they don't have vision with a low ground unit, so I'd like to see that come out, but we'll see. Roach Warren is going to start with a third base for Nurchio.
Indeed, getting that natural as his third base. Since he already got the gold base, might as well grab that natural now. Really cool that I see Nurchio just kind of positioning a couple of these Lings. I think he's waiting for maybe, oh man, look at the timing on that. Knows perfectly when those Hellions are leaving and just moves in with the other Lings. It's going to be kind of hard to do too much damage here, but he might be able to net a scout. No, doesn't get into the main base. What I think he really wants to see is whether or not there's any kind of add-ons on the starport, and I don't... Oh, he did actually see the tech lab on the starport.
And he sees that the tech lab is also researching, so there's really only one thing it's going to be in the early stage of the game, which is that cloak upgrade for the Banshee. This is not one of those maps where you see a ranged Liberator come out. Maybe you could try to put it on the gold base if someone took it very early, but it's still not really a thing that Terran players will do in this map. So you know that Roaches, I mean, they shouldn't be crazy effective. Maybe you want a couple defensive against the Hellions, but Banshees are one of the best things in the game at defending against those early Roach attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. We already have the spores going down right now as the Hellions making their way across the map once again. They haven't been able to shut down too much of the creep spread so far. Queen's able to get up a couple of those active creep tumors. We're going to see, is there going to be a scan from Clem? No, he's just going to maybe go ham. I mean, the gold base is a pretty wide open area, so if the Hellions get in there.
Well, you know, Ravi, we have 5 Roaches coming in, but a Nidus network is being built. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, would you want to throw the Hellions away on that mineral line? You don't really want to expose yourself to a counterattack, but if he had dived in and tried to get some drones, he would have seen the Nidus. And that is going to be so important because at this point, he needs to be cranking out some more powerful units and bringing everything back home to stop it. But that Nidus, it's on the way right inside the natural expansion of Clem. What's he going to do?
Oh, I don't know if he's realizing. He might be busy microing his Hellions. He's running straight into the main base. The Banshees were actually hitting from multiple different angles, but now Nidus Worm unloading the Queens.
And now he's got Roaches and Queens inside of his base. There's the Banshee, but there's an Overseer here with those Queens. So drones are going to die back home to the Hellions. But what is inside of Clem's base to help deal with this? We have a siege tank on the way. And I mean, it gets a little bit weird by putting that Nidus inside the natural. He has to break down the wall to get to the rest of the production to prevent the bio from clumping up together and fighting as one.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's worth noting that Nurchio is only sitting on 27 workers. He lost 13 of them to the Hellion run by. He's killing off a lot of workers, but he might need to end the game here if he wants to make this work. And Clem, he's got up the siege tank, and the Queen count just isn't that high anymore.
Does a great job of hitting the Banshee with the corrosive biles. The next wave of Lings that come in is what really helps him deal with the amount of SCVs that's been pulled to fight against this. But there is that siege tank. He's trying to get everything on top of it. The SCVs are holding it together just fine so far. Hits it with a bile, but another wave of units is going to come out for Nurchio, and 42 SCVs being killed. That Ling reinforcement. Getting the Banshee with that bile is so important, and I think we're going to see Nurchio take this game.
Yeah, at this point, there's just not enough units left over. Nurchio securing a 1-0 lead in his first game today. Really, really solid Nidus play.
Not too shabby. Yeah. Things got a little bit weird there. I mean, if we think about the progression, a lot of damage was done back in Nurchio's base, which is always nice, but you have to be able to get rid of that Nidus. The Banshee got a lot of work done. The number of Roaches and Ravagers was not that high, and we know that SCVs they do a lot better versus the Ravagers because they're bigger, you can get more of them around them, but also they have less hit points. So it almost looked like he had that opportunity, but because he couldn't get to the Nidus itself, it was just that next wave of Lings that dealt with the Hellions, and suddenly 20-30 Lings stream in, and all those SCVs that are surrounding the Roaches, that are surrounding the Ravagers and the Queens, they're all dead to the Zerglings.
Yeah, I feel like it was also a little bit unfortunate too, because sometimes you can kind of get lucky as the Terran player. Like the Nidus Worm pops in, and your next round of production just pops out right then. Maybe you get that next siege tank out, or even a Hellion or two. For Clem, it seemed like the most unfortunate timing possible. It was a solid 15-20 seconds. The Nidus Worm was going up. The Nidus Worm pops out. The units start popping out, and then the units start coming out. It's like, if they just come out a little bit sooner, maybe he's a bit more prepared, but at the end of the day, it was still well executed and well hidden by Nurchio.
Yep. It's one of those situations where you maybe wanted to run that Hellion Reaper play into the gold base rather than the main. If you think about it, the drones at the gold are mining more. Killing those is technically more damage, quote unquote, but it's also pretty normal to put that Nidus in the main, since you're like, well, maybe he won't get there.
I feel like it's also really common to see.
The main's a bigger scan target too.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. I was also going to say, like, I feel like it's very common to see the Banshees go behind the gold base if they know that the gold base is there, to try and harass from there, just because it's an easy hop up between there and the main base. But we ended up seeing Clem instead go to the natural, go into the main base, and I wonder if that's even just like something that both players have sort of figured out when they play against each other on ladder.
If the Nidus was anywhere else, you would have seen it. So kudos to Nurchio for saying, I'm going to put my tech in the place that it would be the most vulnerable. The gold base would be the most vulnerable base on that map. If he was to do some sort of early push where he had Cyclones maybe to knock down the rocks, the reinforcement path is completely cut off. But Nurchio was not thinking of a game going that long. So let's see now if he's going to close things out or if we'll have Clem tie things up in our first series of the day here for WCS.
All right. Our next map is going to be the one and only Backwater. We are going to be starting, of course, down the bottom right-hand corner of the map very shortly. As there we go. It's the blue Terran player, still sitting down 0-1, but still has an opportunity to come back in this. It's Clem.
And he's facing off against our Polish Zerg in the Northwest, leading the series 1-0. He is Nurchio.
You know, Clem is one of those players I was talking about. He's been incredibly successful. I would say him, Raynor, a lot of these youngsters that we're talking about coming into the WCS circuit this year have done exceptionally well in these online tournaments, but even though this is also an online tournament, there is a different level of pressure associated with this that Clem may not be 100% used to. So I'm really hoping we can see him kind of blossom and bloom as he gets to get a little bit more experience today.
Yeah, this makes for that cool story that we saw in the Europe group yesterday and in North American group yesterday is that you have the players that we see as more experienced and you have a couple players that are not as experienced. And even though you'd say, like, yeah, okay, Clem is very good, like, I've seen his name around, but we haven't had him in these tournaments, right? He's very young. And it's like, everybody knows who some of these players are if you watch the online cups, if you watch the online tournaments. But that does not mean that these players have that big stage experience, and you still get to that, it's that next level where Clem is, he is playing for WCS at this point. He is trying to get points. He's playing for money and potentially seeding, not only for this tournament, but for future circuit events as well. So there is a lot at stake in being able to keep cool, keep calm, keep collected. Well, we already know Nurchio can do that. He's been in the biggest stages that you can be.
Yeah, a literal tournament champion of the past, but we got 6lings coming out because Nurchio says, okay, open up game 1 with a Nidus Swarm, cool. Open up game 2. It's not a crazy early all-in by any means, but the early pool does allow him, or at least the pool before hatchery, allows him to maybe put some pressure on the command center. The Reaper has popped out, but oh, guess what? It's already out on the map right now. It's on the wrong side of the map.
The Reaper's about to hit the natural expansion, so these Zerglings uncontested now on this base. That Marine needs to stay alive. The Zerglings are going to come over. They'll say, okay, well, we'll take another SCV. No big deal. They've delayed the base a little bit. He would still really like to get that Marine, as that changes a lot of things here, but the Reaper's coming back. He's killed 4 SCVs.
Oh my god.
Looking towards 5. Will potentially settle for the Marine. No, tries to go inside the main, and well, he sees that the factory and the reactor are just about done. He sees a bunker was started.
Oh my god, the bunker, I think, is the ultimate show that Clem was just getting really afraid of how much damage was happening. Because if there was some sort of crazy Ling follow-up, if he was in fact playing versus a no-regret build or something, and this would be a big trouble situation for Clem, having lost so much, but he is just going to be up against a macroing Nurchio, and that bunker makes it even worse now.
Yep. It's a very awkward situation when you're playing Terran and you lose those early workers. You know, because at first you're like, well, yeah, he's did a little ring run by, it's no big deal. But you only have that one Marine, and we saw Future get into this weird spot against Jon Snow yesterday where he was like, I don't want to take damage, so I'm going to build extra Marines. But then his reactor's very late. So Clem loses those SCVs, but he has his infrastructure up. He has the Hellion production coming out. It's very important that he gets something done here with the Hellion and the Reapers, so he needs to put some pressure on.
Ah, but it's so difficult. The wall is already up there. There's a road for
Backwater.
Yeah. It's hard to ever really get too much damage done until you get out something like Medivacs on this map, just because an easy third base that you just can't pressure outside of maybe the Reaper hopping up, it's so safe.
Yep, that's the biggest thing about this map, is this choke point between the 2 evolution chambers is the only ground path into his base. So he's going to throw the Reaper grenade, tries to bounce back the Queen, and it actually does work, at least well enough that he's able to get to the mineral line. So a nice little pickup here for Clem, as he should be able to grab a few drones. 3 is not the number he's looking for. He wants to get at least 6. Anything over that is going to be very nice. 8 drone kills, 10! And he's feeling very good about his Hellion harass.
Okay, I mean, I like the finish there from Nurchio. He had the drones on hold position by the choke point to make sure the Hellions could not escape, at least. But man, that was still a lot of damage, like you said. You can already see that Nurchio is barely sitting up 5 or 6 workers. And remember, he has to now choose between making units and workers, whereas Clem is going to be making both at the same time, although he only has 2 Marines out, but that's because he's finishing up all of his add-ons, getting out a Banshee. And his factory, I guess, is just going to be lifted up in the air for now. Not going to be making any more add-ons since the barracks are getting started right now.
Now, this is where you see the weirdness. That he attacks with just 3 roaches, and honestly, this is not a lot.
There's only 3 Marines, though.
It's enough to one-shot the units that are here defending.
Oh my god.
So what he's saying is, I'm not going to make a big commitment to counterattacking, but I'm just going to throw what I have at you since I know that you only really had those Hellions. So Nerchio says, well, I'm going to kind of make that harass that you just did not worth it. And most Zerg players, you really wouldn't do this. You'd either try to build more roaches and go for a big counterattack, or you'd keep what you have at home and just drone up. But Nerchio says, if you're going to try to get value out of those handful of weak units you have, then I will get some value out of mine. And that 5 SCV kill puts us in a much better, or puts Nerchio, excuse me, in a much better position economically versus Clem, as those workers are more difficult to get in the early stages for Terran.
Man, I just feel like that's the ultimate showcasing of how good an understanding Nerchio has of this game. I think 9 out of 10 Zerg players does not think to counterattack with 3 roaches there.
And he looks like a fool, by the way, if he does that and there's a bunker. But Clem was just playing this one a little bit recklessly there, where he's saying, I'm not going to move all my units out and have nothing to defend at home. He's lucky there weren't more roaches that were already coming out at that point, because he might have died.
Yeah, there is a 4th base also going up over here for Nerchio. He droned up like a madman behind that light 3 roach pressure. Is getting up an infestation pit. He's getting up his upgrades on those evolution chambers. Starting up plus 1 melee a little late.
He's sticking to the Ling upgrades, so we're not going to see him push for some big Hydra-based army comp or heavy roaches, Roach Ravager. It's going to be leaning perhaps towards that Ling, Ultra Baneling style that we see maybe with some Vipers.
Yeah, definitely something that we've seen from many Zerg players out there, but Clem at least has his 3rd base up. Even though he's lost a handful of those workers on the defense, he finally has his extra units up to try and put on some more pressure besides just that Banshee harassment. This is where Backwater finally is going to start seeing some potential for Terran harassments. You can move between the 4th base and the main base very easily. 3rd base very vulnerable. Lots of points for drop harassment.
Yeah, and this is where it gets weird, because we have the creep spread between all the bases. We talked about the Ling composition, but he's using roaches with roach speed to defend the early attacks, as the Baneling Nest has only started just now with the Hive. So he's saying, I need these roaches to stop the attack. It's only weird because the Banshee is there, which kind of mucks things up a little bit. He will want to have an Overseer potentially there. But he forces the pickup on the Medivacs, and they're actually just going on the retreat. The more time that Nerchio gets in this position, the better for him.
Yeah, he's getting up that Baneling Nest, and as soon as that Baneling Nest is finished up, he still has a bit of time before he's going to get Baneling speed up, especially against Stim Marines. It's going to be pretty hard to make the good connections, but with some good creep spread that he already has, it's still very much possible, and it puts a timer on any of these drops before they have to kind of lift up and pick up and go somewhere else. But man, I love this. Even the Spore Crawlers going down, just saying, yeah, you know what, I'm at 73 drones. I can afford to make a couple of spores just to deny your drop potential.
Yeah, it doesn't want to have to deal with the potential of that, as you said, the back harass where he's just flying across, because that's what makes Backwater such a good map for Terran, is they're the ones that can abuse that aerial transition towards those pocket bases the most easily. Now Clem goes for a few scans, going to clear up the creep tumors in the middle of the map, very good. I think on this map that creep spread is so big. Getting the queens here would also be really nice, but now that the roaches are here, just pick up and get out.
Yeah, loses a few Marines, but not a huge deal. Keeps the Medivacs alive, barely takes any damage on them either. And Nerchio still manages to get a really good cleanup there. I mean, he just, besides that early Hellion attack, he's not really taking any damage this game.
Nope. And I mean, it's been a nice thing to see. The Ultros Cavern starts, he gets the 2/2 for his Zerglings, and position-wise, Clem still has a lot to work with, but we're mostly seeing him build a lot of Marines. What's the tank count at back at home? He's been building 2 at a time.
He's up at 4 now.
Oh, it's okay, but I mean, what he's doing, where for the most part, is still basically mass Marines, which means a handful of infestors, 1 or 2 fungals with Ultra Bane, and you're going to lose everything that you have. So he needs to be very, very careful.
Yeah, talking about the infestors, I really like that you brought that up, because I feel as though that is something that a lot of Zerg players shy away from. They just love going straight up into the Ultras. They don't want any delay on getting up that Hive Tech or the Vipers. But Nerchio is one of those players that I feel like is willing to sit around maybe a little bit longer on Lair Tech, get up some Infestors or something. He does have the Ultras coming out pretty quickly, but getting up the Infestors I really love.
Yeah, the drops are spread out. I mean, I do like this setup, but Clem, for all the investment he's made into these Marines, these Medivacs, hasn't really gotten a whole lot done with them. Maybe keep the Banshee on the pressure, but for the most part, Terran late game in this metagame is still pretty good. If he decides that he wants to slow things down, try to split this map, get ghosts. We have the Ghost Academy done now. There's a lot of late game potential here. Maybe a transition as well into Liberators, perhaps Ravens. As we've seen, Ravens are almost sometimes grossly cost effective versus Zerg in this end game stage.
Okay, double Medevacs trying to clear up some of the creep spread, which is also, I wouldn't say it's been getting totally out of control. I feel like Clem's actually done a pretty nice job of pushing it back constantly, but he really needs to make sure he can get straight into the actual bases right now of Nerchio, because he still has a long way to go before he gets there. Oh, oh God, he just killed his own Medevac.
That's a classic mistake. Why that happens to the best of us? You're frantically A-clicking, you're looking for damage. Lings are going to run by that fourth base, but a Planetary Fortress should be able to hold it down just fine.
Well, I think they actually get into the main base. The supply depot's down as Clem is focused on this main engagement.
The Ultralisks can't get out of that wall. Oh my God, the Ultras all have to kill the Roach Warren to escape. This gives some time for the Bio to fire upon these forces. Most of the tanks are cleaned up, and even though the Banelings are dead, there's not enough like Marauders to kill these Ultralisks. It's just Marines on even upgrades. It's not going to cut it.
Quite frankly, Nate, I feel like this was the ultimate showing that Nerchio has just actually been ahead, even if the supply has not exactly reflected it.
His Ultras were absent from the fight while he killed his own Roach Warren, and he's still Gucci.
He limbo lined his units in and still won. That's always a good showing that you're probably in a pretty good spot.
These high ground tanks aren't too bad with the Planetary Fortress support. A few of the Ultras are getting very low, so we're seeing here Nerchio make what looks like an overextension for sure. He's still getting a good amount of damage, and he's still taking out units like those tanks and whatnot. But he's at the point where he's like, I'm going to have that one Ultra fight your whole army, and then Clem can actually deal with this. He does kill a lot of SCVs behind it, don't be mistaken. But weirdly enough, Clem overproduced workers this game. Okay, this next move is very nice. Because despite losing 37 SCVs, he still has 44, which is manageable. On 4 command centers, he can get that worker count back up pretty damn fast.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that Clem is able to eventually clean up and that he still has 44 workers, but I also just feel like Nerchio did a great job of buying time with that kind of run-by of Ultras. Not something you get to say very often, the Ultra run-by, but he just waited and moved as far into Clem's territory as possible, pulling him all the way back into the far reaches of the third base. And behind this, he's getting up another wave of Ultras. He's been getting up those 3/3 upgrades.
He's getting a drop to go for some Zergling harass as well with that. So we're gonna
maybe a drop Ultra harass. No.
Cats was here last night doing tests, but Cats isn't here today.
That's true. Yeah, most likely for the Ling harassment, as you said. Just mostly making some jokes, but okay. just to clarify for Reddit, you know, just Reddit, please.
They'll only clip it if the Ultralist drop harass actually happens.
Oh God, you know,
it is going to be
small part of me. Small part of me.
It is going to be this time, and a big run by gets through at the same time into the natural. So these Lings are going to hold the Marines here while he ravages both of those mineral lines, because that drop is landing in the third base. Those 2 Ultras are going to try to run through, but he does have the pew-pews off of those Ghosts. They're going to steadily target those Ultralisks down to 0 hit points, and only losing 9 SCVs for the amount of Lings that he put in. That hurts.
I like this. Burrowing a couple of these Lings. We see scans coming down as he tries to take out some of the other Lings, and yeah, he does eventually end up scanning that third base as well. Catches all the Lings, snipes off the drop Overlord. Liberator was able to do some good damage, it looks like, over by the newer expansion, this top middle side of the map.
Yeah, but, Clem, he's doing a good job fighting here. He's picked off quite a few drones. That Liberator just gets to chunk out half the Ultralisk's health.
Oh, but this is the danger zone now. Nerchio is already up to the Corruptors, but he also has a Greater Spire that he had finished up a while ago. So what exactly is going to be Clem's response? He has the Ghosts, and they are actually out in decent numbers. They can handle this.
Ghosts. He's got 9 Ghosts. There's only a handful of tanks and 2 Liberators in terms of that backbone to support a fallback position for the Ghosts, which makes me a little bit nervous. We'll have to see, because the composition balances out to a kind of weird thing where there's also not really a whole lot for Nerchio. There's no Banelings. He only has 16 Zerglings.
You know, I feel like Banelings versus Ghosts are sometimes one of the weirdest interactions, because Ghosts, you just think that they should fall over. They're so skinny. They seem like they're so frail.
The Ghosts are not light units.
No, and they don't die to... It takes like 5 Banelings to kill a Ghost or something.
Yep, if it's being killed by Medevacs, even more. It's a weird unit interaction, but they will shut down the steady targeting if your ghosts are trying to land those long-range shots. But running Banelings into them, still okay.
Okay, it looks like Nerchio running around with some of the Banelings defensively, but he moves in with a lot of these Lings. Even the Corruptors and the Ultras going to be able to take out that Planetary Fortress in a matter of seconds. Clem on the retreat right now.
Yeah, having to run back for that base, that really hurts. I think that right there is a key play that we're going to be talking about after this game, where Clem loses a large amount of that mineral income. Yes, the minerals in his third are still kind of there because he lost so many workers earlier on, but he's recharged all the way to 73. And that one random Ultra, okay, that's a good grab. That is a nice one.
That feeling when the Ultra almost makes it out alive, literally running past the army.
Ultras are buff boys. He's got to fly that main command center over to that fourth again. The Ultralisk and the Banelings are going to try to jump down this army at the ramp. The Ghost's not given enough time to go for those snipes. Lands a few of them, but the Ling Bane surround on them is going to keep them from firing off those shots, since Overseers will make Cloak useless. I don't even think they're cloaking. And the Corruptors are going to get a lot of these medevacs on the way out.
Oh man, I think one of those medevacs has just a Marine inside, but it's the medevacs with a ghost.
The stuck ones are full of units too, and he's going to pick off all of them. Clem falls to 30 army supply versus 112.
And that's going to be a GG. Nerchio moves on to the winner's match in WCS EU Challenger.
Can't say we're surprised. Nerchio played a really good game. Clem put his best foot forward, but there were a few things that really stood out as just hurting. And it came down a lot to the way that the early game units were used. On the first map, we saw the Hellion Reaper play, and it was nice, but he wasn't able to find the Nidus. I'm willing to chalk that one up to a bit of weird luck, because he did check the natural. He checked the main base, expecting it in the back of the gold. Yeah, of course, you know, like, you should try to make sure. That was just like
clever play from Nerchio and a little bit unfortunate, yeah.
It's not uncommon to see players who take that fast gold, try to use it to make an attack hit earlier than it normally would, because you have more income than normal. So I don't really blame him too much for that.
Yeah.
That was a rough one. But in this last game, the big things to keep in mind were he didn't leave anything behind by the Planetary at the 5th base that he wanted to hold. As a Terran, it's okay to burn out a lot of these units, but the run-bys also really hurt him. I like seeing the walls open towards where your army is. Just as an example, when you have that wall at the natural expansion, those 2 depots at the top, keep those ones raised, lower the depot by the bottom that leads the funnel towards that 4th base, because your army's at the 4th. So it's just about limiting the pathways that they can take. And I'm never going to say no to a sensor tower as well, because that also helps a ton.
I feel like that actually, that's a really good point, is having a sensor tower would have helped out a lot, and just being able to predict these run-bys, because it was eventually the run-bys that ended up pulling Clem a bit apart at the end. We saw him get a really nice kind of bit of damage with the Hellion attack earlier on, but after that, it just felt like Nerchio just got further and further ahead throughout the game.
Yeah. Otherwise, great play by Nerchio. I think we got the championship caliber play that we expect out of him.
What happened to the infestors? I don't think I saw those infestors after he made them.
Yeah.
I don't remember those infestors in that game.
They're often like bullies or something. They're just having a good time.
Yeah, but like you said, he is going to be moving on to that winner's match. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be hopping into our other starting match today. I believe it's going to be the one and only Soul facing off versus Euthermal. Battle of the Terrans.
Nice. That's going to be some TVZ coming up.